What is it that makes some people able to turn ordinary or even unpleasant jobs into labors of love? I haven't found a full answer yet, but I suspect it might have a lot to do with one's outlook on life, one's religion, if you will. I think it has to do with taking responsibility because you know or believe that good and heaven are made on this earth, in this life, by us. That is why Unitarian Universalists believe in deed, not creed, in doing what we can to make things better because we believe it is up to us to do it. I suspect that's why a disproportionate number of UUs work in the helping professions or human service jobs. But it's more than that. Certainly other people in other religions also do all kinds of good things. We have no monopoly on service, and churches do a great deal to help others. But I wonder if they do those good things out of love and a feeling of personal engagement and satisfaction for doing them, or because they feel some sort of pressure from outside, which makes their good deeds a result of a sense of obligation or even self-preservation. I never questioned people's motives for doing good until I met Floyd. He was one of my colleagues at Buena Vista College. Now, Floyd was a good Christian. In fact, he managed to get into the conversation quite often. And he did many, many good deeds in the college and the community. Good old Floyd could always be counted on to raise money for good causes, to be a big brother to some unfortunate boy, to serve as a lay preacher for little struggling churches that couldn't afford ministers, to serve on councils and committees, and many other things. He was always busy doing good, and lots of people saw him as a paragon of virtue. But there was another side to Floyd. He sometimes beat his wife. He often made racist, sexist, or homophobic remarks about students. He was occasionally caught pinching the behinds of some attractive young co-ed, and he once blackballed a prospective teacher because she was too fat. I had a hard time reconciling some of his actions with his claim to be a good Christian. It took another of our colleagues to explain it to me. You see, he said, Floyd thinks that God is up there keeping a tally on what everyone does. As long as you have more marks on the good deed side of your slate than on the bad side, you'll go to heaven. So Floyd makes sure he has a good deed for every bad thing he does or says, +1. The reason he does so many good things is because he does so many bad things. Now that's an interesting way to look at the world, and it clearly means that the person is not doing good works as a labor of love. It comes from a worldview that is grounded in a belief in a punishing, controlling God and a fear that somehow missing the mark will end one up in hell. This is a common theme in many religions. Instill fear in people, which is supposed to keep them on a straight and narrow path. But nobody's perfect. People do stray occasionally. So religions have devised ways to kind of let them off the hook. Catholics can confess their sins, do penance, and start over with a clean slate. Some Protestants, like good old Floyd, assure salvation by keeping one good deed ahead. Such a worldview may motivate folks to do good things, but I question the attitude with which they do them, not out of love, but out of fear. Unitarian Universalists have historically had difficulty with the notion of a punishing God. The early Universalists could not accept a God that would condemn people to eternal damnation for some misdeed. They envisioned a forgiving God, a loving God, a God that would provide universal salvation, hence the name Universalists. Believing that if there is a God, he or she would be a loving God, puts everything in a different perspective. People who feel loved respond in kind. Psychologists tell us that children who are loved become loving parents. Those who are not loved often become child abusers. They also tell us that in order to be able to love others, one has to love oneself. And it's almost impossible to love yourself unless you feel loved by others. So I think the idea of a loving God empowers us to love, and it is an important aspect of being able to perform labors of love. Another possible motivator is one's attitude toward Jesus. Christianity has made of Jesus something more than human. The real Jesus, the man who walked and talked among the long paths of the ancient world, the man who demonstrated love for his people through acts of good sense and kindness, that Jesus has been completely lost in the myths and the legends created by the early Christians, who lived in isolated areas in the Roman Empire and had no way of knowing anything about the real Jesus. So they created a Messiah whose birth and death and supposed resurrection became more important than his life. He was the Savior, the Son of God, part of the Trinity. But this view has problems. Look at Jesus as a Savior, and what he did takes on a non-human quality. His deeds are not things that we mere humans could be expected to emulate. Look at Jesus as a man, however, and we see a model for all of us. Certainly not the only model, but a pretty good one nonetheless. Look at Jesus as a man, and his importance becomes the written record, the first and one of the most thorough, of the deeds and ideals of an exemplary human being. He becomes someone whose life can show us a good way to live among our kindred humans, a way grounded in love for all. The Jesus who has meaning for us is the Jesus who performed labors of love, and in so doing, modeled a loving way of being in the world. That is why we should know about Jesus. In addition to our views of God and Jesus, we UUs have benefited from the humanist philosophy, which has been an important part of our recent history. Humanism also teaches us love of humanity. In fact, it says love of humans is more important than love of God because it has more purpose. But humanism goes a step further and shows that love of humanity is useless unless accompanied by action, deeds which will improve humanity, the world in which we live, and the condition of all living beings. Humanism has no patience with any notion that a God or anything else is going to do it for us, or that there is some predetermined pattern that things will follow, so there's no point in doing anything. Humanism decrees that the world is our responsibility. We are the hope of the future, and our salvation, if there is any, lies in doing what we can here on earth to make things better. This is a very activist approach to life, and it is one which moves us to do what we can to enrich our own lives and the lives of others. It leads to labors of love. It's interesting to me that so many religious groups believe that without a strong belief in God, especially a God who has the power to punish wrongdoers, people will not be motivated to do good. The dominant American religious philosophy is based on this notion. Various politicians have claimed that it would be dangerous to have an atheist or non-believers in positions of authority because they are, by definition, unethical or immoral. I think they have it backwards. Non-believers and humanists are more apt to feel that they need to do good things to keep the world going because they don't believe in a God that will do it for them. Nor do they believe that everything is predetermined by some intangible being or force, so when things actually do go wrong, they try and figure out why it happened wrong so that they might be able to make it better in the future. Yet all religions, without exception, have some version of what we call the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is the basis for good works, the principle of reciprocation. If you love yourself, you must also love others. And what you would like for yourself, you should also want for everyone, and it's up to you to make it so. This principle, so basic to life and religion, says nothing about God and everything about undertaking labors of love. I don't know what motivates Tiny, the cook at Shelley's, to turn this seemingly unpleasant job of cooking eggs into an opportunity to make life just a little brighter for people he doesn't know and doesn't even get to talk to. Nor am I sure why some of you continue year after year to come in good spirit and perform the menial tasks of church-keeping with such grace and good cheer. I suppose we can never know for sure why some people are able to turn ordinary or even onerous work into labors of love. But I suspect, at least in the case of WUUs, it has a lot to do with our religious views. If that is true, it's even more important that we help others see the wisdom and value of our religion. For think what the world would be like if everyone became infected with the desire to do good deeds, not because of obligation or compensation or fear of reprisal or damnation, but as labors of love. Oh, I would love to see that day. Perhaps if enough of us model such labors, we might change the world just a little.